So welcome to my channel, and if you are new to this channel, my name is Claire Casey and I am an independent fantasy author and poet. But for this video I'm actually going to be looking at a novel that I'd managed to read earlier on this year, and it's a book that my best friend bought me as a part of my Christmas for last year, so back in 2020. So I'm going to be talking about that in just a moment, but some housekeeping first. If you are enjoying my channel, if you are enjoying my videos, if you can click on that subscriber button, click on that notification bell, leave some likes, leave some comments, it's always really appreciated. And if you'd like to support the channel further, I will post a link to the channelscoffee.com page in the description bar below and a pinned comment in the comment section. So with that out the road, it's time to get on to the main topic of this video. So the book that I'm going to be talking about for this video is a book called Augustown by Kei Miller. So Kei Miller is from Jamaica. He's actually from the real town of Augustown, and the Augustown of the book's title is more of a kind of fictionalised version of the town that he's from. And Kei Millar has actually gotten a PhD in English language from the University of Glasgow in Scotland. And yeah, so again, that's the university I went to, so it's got to be good. And the whole kind of story does very much centre around the idea of what in Jamaica is referred to as an auto clap. And you do very much get a very handy description of what an auto clap is at the back of the book. I will read it out because you might not be able to read it there. So auto claps is a noun, Jamaican dialect, an impending disaster, calamity, trouble on top of trouble. And I'm pretty sure I did read somewhere that the idea of the word auto clap has some kind of connection to the word apocalypse. So it's kind of that kind of idea of just this idea of impending doom. So it's, again, this is the first time I'd actually ever read any of Kei Millar's books, and I have to admit I really enjoyed this. And it's like the use of language, and the whole suggestion of Jamaican dialect works really well, because it's not heavy-handed, it's not overdone. You do get a very clear sense of the Jamaican dialect, but without it being impenetrable or difficult to understand. And it just does add an extra layer to like the story and what's going on, and like the kind of conflict between some of the characters. So as I was saying, like the novel Augustown is set in a fictionalised version of the real life Jamaican town of Augustown, and even from the very beginning there is this kind of sense of tension within the story. It is easy to have that very much this feeling that something's going to happen. It's not something good, it's not something positive. It's just this feeling, as the idea of the auto clap suggests, is this feeling of oppression, that something is just hanging over the area and you just know that something is going to happen. And it is very much seen right at the start of the book when you have Ma Taffy, who is one of the main characters, and she's sitting on a veranda as she normally does. She's blind, she's old, but she seems to see and understand more of what's going on around her than most of the other characters. So a lot of people seem to see Ma Taffy as being the cat. Well, within the book, a lot of the other characters see Ma Taffy as being just this old blind woman who shouldn't really know what's going on, but she does. So she's sitting on a veranda, and it's that afternoon, And it's when her grandson comes home from school and they're sitting there and she just knows that something's not quite right. And you have to bear in mind, like, this is in Jamaica, and Matafi's family is Rastafarian. So within the Rastafarian culture, dreadlocks are very, very important. And it's very, very much like you don't cut your hair. Just it's almost a kind of matter of pride. It's like you don't cut your hair. But Taffy ends up putting her hand on her grandson's head and his dreadlocks are gone. And it's in that moment that she realises, or has a better idea of like what has happened. She knows that her grandson has had his head sheared or shorn. It's like the hair's been taken off. And that again just adds to the sense of dread and the sense that something is going to happen. And it's after that moment you realise that the person who has cut Matt Happy's grandson's hair, who essentially has taken this boy's dreadlocks off, is the teacher in the local school. And I do hope I'm pronouncing the character's name right. It's Mr. St. Joseph's. I probably am pronouncing it wrong, but he's the one of the teachers in the local school, and he tries to present himself as being a very kind of upstanding, religious, a very good Christian, but it has this kind of animosity towards the Rastafarians, and just that doesn't like anything to do with Rastafarian culture at all. And that's part of the reason why he kind of end up just picking on, is it Kaya, Matafi's grandson. And even though Mr. St. Joseph's wants to present himself as being this upright, honourable Christian, so you know from fairly early on, from meeting him as a character, you know there's a darkness there. You know that there's something not quite right with this character. And you know that is going to be part of the reason of why things come to a head. And how he handles the character does very much play into one of the themes of Augustown as a novel, which is the idea of identity, how we see ourselves, how we present ourselves to others, how they see us, and how that creates a sense or an idea of who we are as a person. And that is kind of a theme that runs throughout the entirety of Augustown as a book. And one thing I did kind of find interesting about how a lot of the characters in Augustown were presented was that even though a lot of them do come from a kind of Christian tradition, a lot of them are Rastafarian or are Christian or some sort of Abrahamic background, they tell both Bible stories and Anasazi stories. So that blending of like the biblical tradition and the African tradition, that even though they may not follow like the old kind of like pagan traditions of their ancestors are still not forgotten. They still tell stories that remind them of where their ancestors came from, where their culture originated from. So it was that kind of mix of different things to create something new. And it does very much tie into the whole idea of someone's identity is not made up by just not one thing, it's not defined by just one thing. There's different factors, there's different aspects to people's identities, to how they see themselves, how others see themselves, how they present themselves within certain groups. And it does kind of make it very kind of complicated and nuanced, and I think that just kind of adds another layer, another flavour to Augustown as a novel. And there is also this kind of idea of people's beliefs, people's views being mocked, and it can very much be seen with the preacher. It's Bedward, who was an historical figure in Jamaica. And if I remember correctly, he's seen as being, or he was the founder of what would become Rastafarianism. Because I think it started out as being called Bedwardinism. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, sorry. But he is seen as being the founder of what is now known as Rastafarianism. And this seems to kind of be something that continues on within the story itself. And it is this mocking of like the people of Augustown and their beliefs and their following of the preacher Bedward is very much kind of highlighted as being something that is faced on a regular basis by the people of Augustown, because it's very much highlighted and kind of talked about a lot of the people who are maybe higher up in the hill, or about maybe kind of more from more affluent areas, kind of look down physically and metaphorically on the people of Augustown, and see them as maybe being a bit kind of lower class, a bit backward, and it is kind of very much highlighted with like the landscape of the more affluent people being higher up in the hill and kind of looking down on everything else that's going on. But there's also maybe kind of something reflected back on them as well, especially in relation to the whole idea of identity within the book, because within the novel itself, Ma Taffy very much has the idea and the belief that black people who have European names have very little identity, and or they're could be belittling their own heritage, that they're trying to deny that who they really are, and deny where they've come from, and deny the connection that they have to like their ancestors or to Africa. And it's kind of very much robbing them of that heritage and that connection to Africa. And that's kind of pretty much how she sees it throughout most of the book. And while I was reading Augustown, I did kind of get the feeling that there were some similar ideas and maybe themes that you might find within Alex Haley's Roots. That it's the whole idea of identity and holding on to your roots and your heritage, and how that plays an important part in your identity as a person, and how that can influence who you are and how you live your life. And one thing I always kind of found throughout the book as well is like, with the fact that the main bit of the story, which is kind of what in relation to Kai and Ma Taffy and to Kai's mother, that happens over a very short period of time. I think that happens over within like a day or 2 days at most. But a lot of other things that happen within the book takes you back into the past. It takes you back into the things that have happened before in Augustown, in relation to the preacher Bedward. It's Bedward. To the preacher Bedward, to other things that have happened to other people who have lived in Augustown, and how that all reflects on the events that are taking place within the present day of the book, and how it very much gives it the idea and the feel that everything's all connected, that history repeats itself, that everything's all kind of interwoven, a bit like Anastasia's web. Everything's all interwoven and connected, and everything's all kind of woven together in like some sort of tapestry. And I don't really want to give the ending of the book away, because I do think it is as an ending that I actually really, I think enjoyed is probably the wrong word, but it's an ending that I appreciated, that kind of really made me sit and think. And it's even after I put the book down, I was still thinking about how it ended, and try to kind of play it all through in my head and kind of try and get it all into some sort of order and kind of actually properly sit and thinking it through. And it is an ending that is quite tragic, and yes, it's not a very joyful ending at all, but it's a very, even though it is tragic, it's kind of quite quiet. And even though it's a tragedy that's been building, and you know it's kind of possibly going to be heading towards that, it's quiet and understated. It's not over dramatic or overblown. It's just, this is what's happened. And I also kind of got the impression that because of the way it was written, even though the events are tragic, it's something that the people of Augustown are not unused to. This is something that they've seen over and over again, and it's just that it has that kind of quiet dignity of going, right, okay, something else has happened, we're going to deal with this, we're going to kind of deal with this with ourselves and move on. And it's almost like kind of what happens is going to become another story that gets told within the community, it gets told to the children. It's like the stories that Ma Taffy tells about the preacher Bedward. People are going to be telling stories about what happened to Kaya's mother, or what happened to Ma Taffy, what happened to Kaya, and how that all becomes part of, it's almost like the part of the identity of those who come from Augusttown. Of, yeah, this is the story of the people, of some of the people who called Augusttown home. And it all again plays into the whole running theme of identity and where you have come from and how that shapes and influences who you are. And yeah, so again, I've not really had much talk about Augusttown by Kei Miller, but I would say it's a really enjoyable book, and it's a book that I'm definitely glad that I got the chance to read. And I really appreciate the fact that my best friend went out and got me this book, because she actually got me this as part of what they call, is it Yola Flood? And I know I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, so I do apologise for my terrible Icelandic. But essentially the whole idea is every Christmas Eve, everyone in Iceland gets given a book, and they sit up late at night and they read the book, and they'll have like something to drink with them, they'll have some nibbles, and they'll just sit up and they'll read. So that's the book that my best friend got me for that. So essentially it's Yola Flood, or the Christmas Book Flood, or the Yule Book Flood. So yeah, so that's kind of what I got for last year. Book I really enjoyed. I'm not too sure what year it came out in. Let's have a check. So this came, and so the paperback came out in 2017. So I read, yeah, so it's only a few years old, but definitely one that I would recommend if you're wanting to maybe get into some more like Jamaican literature, read some more about that. Definitely one that I would say put onto your to read lists and sit down, enjoy, and just let the story take you along with it. So that's Augustown by Kei Millar.